Hi, I'm Wendy Murdoch, and this is Webinars with Wendy. I've been doing a series of webinars during the pandemic to entertain myself, talk to my friends, and learn something. Today was supposed to be Amy Lassat as my guest. She's a three-hoof SureFoot practitioner working in Colorado under the auspices of a veterinarian out there. And I know she has some really amazing case studies that I wanted to bring to you. However, due to technical difficulties, we're going to have to move Amy to next week. I think that's September 11th at Friday at 1 o'clock, and we'll make sure we get the technical difficulties resolved before the webinar so that we don't have to worry about that. So what I'm going to do today is just talk more about SureFoot. If you have any questions, please do put them in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'm happy to answer those. And we'll just have our regular Friday meeting with just me, and then we'll bring back our guest next week. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with SureFoot, it's basically something I discovered in 2012, that when we make an offer to horses and give them a voice and allow them to have some choice, that they begin to show us what matters to them. And I think this is one of the things that's so important about SureFoot. Linda Tellington-Jones was my guest for my 100th webinar on Wednesday. And if you haven't watched that webinar, I highly recommend you go back and watch it. Amy just appeared. Wait, she might be here. We'll see. That'd be great if she could join us. So Amy, let me know if you hear me. But Linda and I were talking, and one of the things that we were talking about is the roots of SureFoot and the Tellington work, the T-Touch, is in the Feldenkrais work. And Dr. Feldenkrais was interested in learning, and that was really what his whole concept was about, was using our own body as a way to explore and learn new possibilities of movement. And it gives us a framework for learning. And I think that's one of the things that's most important about the Feldenkrais work, is it's not just simply something we physically do, which was the design of the technique, but also a way of looking at things. It's incredibly Socratic, and the Socratic method is asking questions. So I'm recently listening to a book called The Goal, which is actually a business book, and as my business is expanding, I'm working hard to make sure that things like supply chains are taken care of, and product quality, and all those sort of things. And so a friend of mine suggested I read this book called The Goal, and the bottom line in that book is using the Socratic method in business, asking questions and figuring out what the constraints are, or the things that are holding us back. So let me just see, Amy's there, but I can't hear her. And I'm going to ask her to start video, and I'm just going to chat with her real quick. In our education system, the way we're typically taught in school is that there's a right answer, and we're supposed to get the right answer so that we get the grade. And so the basic system is designed on our studying to answer the questions correctly. And while that's a system of learning, it doesn't teach us to be what I consider critical thinkers. And critical thinkers are those people that can actually look at a situation, analyze it, figure out what's going on, and then resolve whatever issues there are. I don't want to use it much. Do I keep asking the stand? Oh, great connection. Great question. Rhonda, I will answer your question here in a moment. So in your case, actually, Rhonda, you have a couple horses that don't want to use it much. And so, yes, I would keep offering it to them, but on a less frequent basis. I'm not sure how often you're asking, but I would just maybe ask, like if it's once a week, I'd wait and ask twice a week, because I've actually known horses that only want to stand on SureFoot pads every couple of times a month. One of the things that's also interesting is that should you make that offer and that day it's very different, that's a really interesting observation. So offering a different hoof, offering a different pad, changing your frequency, changing your environment are all elements that you can shift when offering SureFoot pads. And, you know, when we think about people, and again, going back to learning, we're supposed to get the right answer. And we're so often looking that there's a right answer with SureFoot with our horse that I have people that will ask me, you know, so my horse has this and this and this. What's the right pad for my horse? And that's really not the basis from which SureFoot comes from. It really comes from this idea that I need to make an offer and then observe what happens to then decide what my next move is going to be. So I might offer a horse a pad on a right front foot and they won't even pick up their leg. And so then, as opposed to saying, oh, my horse doesn't like this, I need to ask the question, something to the effect of, is this horse's leg of security? Is this the one he needs to stand on because he can't stand on the other ones as balanced or as securely, or they're sore? And so which leg might he want to stand on the pad? And so when we switch it around and look at what does this mean when I offer the horse a pad and he says no, what does that mean? Well, in some cases, and Rhonda, it's hard to say without seeing the horse, but in some cases, is the horses are not interested. And what I've found is that the horses that don't need SureFoot, that are very grounded and very secure, they're not that interested. My horse Al is probably one of the ones that was the least interested in standing on pads, but when you look at his foot, he's got a massive frog. As a baby, he was always totally aware of where he still is, but very aware of where his feet are, very nimble, even though he's a big guy. And so it wasn't that meaningful to him. But when the kid was laminitic and we offered her pads, she stood on them very quietly, no swaying, for an hour. And in that case, when they're not swaying like that, we can leave them longer because we're not worrying about the little tiny muscles that are working. So the context in which we are using the pads is really important to help us evaluate what's happening, how the horse is responding. Is there a distraction? Is it a different environment? Is it a different day? And the weather's up. I mean, the other night we had a bear come through the barn. And I could tell because I walked into the barn in the morning and the stalls were just a mess. And there were buckets off the wall in everybody's stall. And normally little mineral buckets, and normally all the buckets are on the wall. And so I asked Dr. Harmon, Joyce, she was in her office above the barn, and she said, yeah, I heard the feed gate. So we have a swinging gate on the feed room squeak. And then she looked out, and in the motion sensor light over by her mom's house, she saw some bear's feet. So when I came in the morning, I was like, what the heck happened? And the answer was there was a bear in the barn. So how did I get there? So horses may not want to stand on pads when they're that worried. And so, you know, that's, let me just look and see if I've got some videos or some pictures. Well, I have this one. I'll share this one. I shared this in Linda's talk. The weirdest thing was that when I had Linda Tellington-Jones on Wednesday, it was September 2nd. And then I got a notification that it was literally 6 years ago to the day that this happened. And Linda came to watch me do SureFoot here in Virginia. And I worked with this horse and I put pads underneath his front feet a couple of times and he fell over. And the best way to describe this is I think he fainted. So, you know, the nervous system has several responses to stress. Fainting is one of them. If you've ever had that experience where you're just overloaded and you just faint, you know, there's fainting goats, but horses can faint, and then he went over like a rock. He was fine, didn't get hurt, nice soft footing. He laid there probably for at least 5 minutes. Linda might say it was longer than that. And I thought I'd killed my first horse with SureFoot. Pretty nerve-wracking to say the least. And then he, did I just lose my Zoom connection? I hope not. You guys still with me there? Oh, crap. What the heck happened? Yeah. Oh, I can't believe this. I gotta unshare my screen. Oh, no. Okay. I thought I lost my Zoom connection there altogether. Okay. Like I said, you'd think by 100 of these I'd have it down, but something flipped in the back of the screen. I thought I lost you. So anyway, you know, it's such a fascinating thing. And when we can let go of the expectations, when we can let go of what they should do, when we can be in the present moment of what they are doing and what we're observing, then we have such a good opportunity to really see this horse in a different light. And with Huey, we were all pretty shocked. In the 8 years I've been doing this, he is the only horse that has fainted. But you know, when I tell people, I say, you always got to be a little careful the first time you work with SureFoot with a horse. Huey is why I say that. Because I had no idea that a horse could faint. Now, what was really interesting about Huey was he was labeled in the barn as a poor learner, as ADD, as, you know, the problem child. But what we saw was that there's something about his nervous system that when we offered him the comfort, it just dropped him. You know, so maybe what was going on with this horse isn't that he's ADD and he's, you know, a bad horse, but that there's something happening in his nervous system that he presents that way. So, you know, when we had Dr. Madeline Ward on, she talked about temperament versus personality. And there's a number of systems that are trying to give horses these personality labels, extrovert, introvert, that sort of thing. But I think it's more important to look at temperament, which is the innate character. And in the Chinese 5-element theory, you have earth, metal, wood, fire, and water. And interestingly enough, prior to the discovery of the periodic table, which was about 150 years ago, that's how we looked at the world in terms of the 5-element theory, and didn't realize about the fact that there's a lot more elemental substances here on this planet. But there's so many horses where the personality and the temperament gets layered over with behaviors that we then call personality. And very often those are a result of habits that are formed due to stressors. And so a horse like Huey, he's being labeled with these names that are expressing his personality, but is that who that horse truly is in his temperament? Or have there been experiences that have occurred? And so now his temperament layered with these experiences and habits result in a personality. And I think if you think about some of your friends, you can see that they have a personality of, you know, like some people are always kind of like finishing their statement with a question or making an excuse so that they never have to be their temperament. They add this personality to give them an out. But when you get down to their temperament, they're either very, very sensitive, or like a fire horse is very gregarious, but when things are bad, they're hysterical. I'm a bit of fire. The other day I went to the DMV, long story, I was a little bit upset. So I can relate to that temperament of fire. And so, you know, when we can start to ask more of these questions about, well, is this the horse's, you know, is the behavior I'm dealing with an issue created by an experience, a habit, or is it really who this horse is? And it's one of the things in my teaching riding for over 30 years that, you know, I look at a student and I look at their potential. I see who they are underneath whatever behavior they're exhibiting. And so much of the behavior that I see in riding is anxiety and fear, inability, like that they can't learn, or they aren't capable of learning, or they aren't capable of doing. And really that's the habits of self-doubt because they weren't educated in a way that allowed them to understand. And I can think of one person in particular, and she came to me with a horse that she couldn't bridle, and Amy probably knows who I'm talking about. And she brought the horse into the arena, and the horse had been, she had the horse and then she sold it, and it went to someone who was rather rough with it, and it was a draft cross. When it came back to her, she couldn't bridle it, and it was very, very nervous. And so she brought it to a SureFoot clinic, and Amy was there. Rhonda, I'm not sure if you were there. And we started with the SureFoot pads, and this very anxious, very large draft cross soon became calmer. So was the anxiety really the temperament of the horse, or was it the behavior of the horse? And in this case, it was the behavior based on past experience, that this was going to be a bad experience for her. So she was already out of there. So we did SureFoot for about a half an hour. On and off the pads. I worked with the hard pads. She was a rather large horse. I wanted to give her comfort, but not too much instability. We even used the physio pad. And I actually do have pictures of her, so I can kind of search for those while I'm talking. And she really calmed down a lot. And then I said to the owner, I said, well, it's time to put a bridle on her. And the owner started to cry. And I thought, well, that's really, really fascinating, that asking her to put the bridle on the horse caused such a drama. And it was because this mare had become so difficult to bridle, and that she had been used as a demo by a tall man to bridle her, much taller than the owner, and how little difficulty he had bridling the horse, where she was having great difficulty. And so, you know, we have this anxiety, which is overlaying the learning, or inhibiting, preventing the learning, because there's so much anxiety and stress. And so very simply, to solve the bridling problem, I asked if they had any molasses. They did. I smeared molasses all over the bit. In 5 minutes, I had the bridle on the horse. Now I'm 5'4". Some people will say I'm 5'3", but you know, there's no way I could get above this horse to put her bridle on because of my height. I know I have pictures of her. And so, you know, it was just about thinking another way to do this, and not confronting the behavior and trying to wrangle the behavior, but simply asking the question of, if I can't do it one way, is there another way I can accomplish this task? And make it so that it's pleasant for both the horse and the owner, so that we reduce the stress and, you know, get the job done so that we can go on, which was to ride the horse. And so the combination of SureFoot to calm her down and molasses to put her bridle on, in the end of 3 days, this horse was taking her bit with very little struggle or even help. I mean, we really didn't even need the molasses very much. We still used that. And when I saw the horse the next year, there was 0 problems bridling. She came into the arena. She was quiet and relaxed. Everything was great. And we went on to riding. So, you know, that's where, if we just simply ask the question of, is there another way to do this? I can't find the pictures, of course, because I wasn't set up for it to start with. Either that, I don't remember what year it was. Oh, I'm getting closer. Yeah. Okay, so I have a little video of this horse. And I think, what year is this? This is 2018, so I think this is a different year. I think this was the following year. I'll just drop the sound out. But we would just use the physio pad, right? And she would come in, right? And you can see she's a rather big horse, and her owner's really tall, so I'm definitely shorter. And it really made a difference to both the horse and owner, because we could, instead of being reactive, we could be actionable. And instead of, dealing with the behavior, we could get to, you can see that this horse really wants to be super sweet and calm, and you can see by her expression on her face and her eye, and she's swaying a tiny little bit, but you can see how she's got a lot of weight more on that right front than the left, and her head's a little bit more organized. But this is where we got with this horse, so that it became a positive experience for everyone. And by using the SureFoot pads, you can take them with you, and you can go to other locations and use the pads and elicit this same response in another place, because the horse has become familiar with SureFoot. And so, yeah, I need a glass of wine today. It's actually a gin and tonic. That's the thing that I think that if we look at SureFoot on a deeper level, and if we look at SureFoot in terms of the roots of its thoughts, in terms of the Feldenkrais method, and where Dr. Feldenkrais was going, he was looking at the possibility of learning. Yeah, I knew you'd remember that horse, Rhonda. And that we want to be able to achieve our potential. So we're all born with a potential. And when we have negative experiences, we can't meet that potential. We can't get there because the negative experiences hold us back, especially if they're having strong emotions associated with them. So when you have a horse that's really nervous, it's a big creature, she's a big creature, and when she got worried, you know, there was all the element of safety. And no, I wouldn't feel safe around a horse that size that's really nervous, because you know, quite frankly, they're big. And so what can we do to help the horse ground so that we can engage the intelligence and not the instinct? And this is what Dr. Feldenkrais was interested in. This is what I'm interested in. This is what Linda Tellington-Jones is interested in. I'm not interested in behavior modification in the sense that you have an adverse behavior and I'm going to train you not to do that behavior, because for me, I don't feel like we are actually getting to the neurological difference that's really going to make the change a significant and real change in the nervous system. And this is where I like Stephen Peters' work so much, because he talks about the neurology, the brain. Here's the brain. These are the parts of the brain. This is what they do. This is the chemicals that are released in the brain. This is what the chemicals do. And when we look at it from that perspective, from a very functional perspective, as opposed to a personality type perspective, then we can see that if we are going to make a permanent change, we have to rewire the circuits in the brain. We have to, you're not ever going to get rid of the emotional experiences that happen to us, but we can take away the emotional charge of that experience. And so for me, you know, when the horse rolled over on top of me in 1984, anytime I saw a horse rear, I wanted to run and throw up. And it took many years before I didn't have that reaction of wanting to run and throw up, because it brought up all of the emotion of the accident. And that's because the hippocampus and the amygdala, which the amygdala is like the supercharger of emotion with attaching it to a memory in the hippocampus, they like create this huge weld. And so when you see something that triggers that reaction, you experience it again. So if we think of PTSD or trauma to horses, and we're going, well, I don't know why you're reacting like that. Well, they're reacting because something triggered that memory. And it may not be anything that you see or smell or hear. It may be something only the horse sees or smells or hears, because their hearing and their sight and their sound sense are different from ours. So, you know, I get people that say, you know, well, my horse should know better. Well, why should he know better? Maybe today when he's walking past that rock that you think he should know better, he smells a bear, or he senses or sees something that you didn't see. And so we're reprimanding him for his alertness. And that's not going to give him comfort. That's only going to make him more worried, because now there's an anxiety associated with the fact that he was trying to tell us, wow, I'm really worried about this thing. If we can take the experience and go in a different perspective and say, wow, why are you worried about this today? Or what is it that about that that's bothering you today that yesterday you were okay? We have a very different line of exploration, a very different line of questioning. Instead of you know better, it's like, wow, what's different? And maybe then we observe that there's a snake, or maybe we sense that somebody says, oh, there was a bear that came through here last night, or whatever. Or maybe we can offer the horse some comfort so that he can go, wow, okay, you're going to keep me safe. I can trust you, as opposed to you are now adding anxiety to my experience because something is different that you don't perceive. And when we can look at it from this perspective, then we have the opportunity for change. So, you know, if somebody told me, well, just get over it, you know, horses are going to rear and you just have to get over it, I would never have gotten over it. I know that. But I worked at it little bits at a time, and I built new choices. So I gave myself the first choice is leave, right? I had permission to leave. I also gave my permission never to get on a horse I didn't feel like getting on, instead of thinking that I had to get on because I was a professional. And so when we can start creating choices, even though we've had a really bad experience, the choices are what allows us to change and make better decisions. And so it was with this horse, we gave her a choice. We said, would you like to stand on a pad and feel comfort? And we gave her a choice. Would you like this nice sweet bit rather than us wrangling with you to get your bridle on? And so when we recognize the anxiety and we say, well, there's another way to go about this, then we are being the intelligent ones. Then we are utilizing our brain and saying, okay, maybe I missed something. What is it I could learn from this experience, instead of saying, you just got to do it anyway? Because the you just got to do it anyway is why the horse reared up the second time and fell over backwards and then rolled over me and punched my femur through the socket. The first time he reared up, he hit me in the face and I didn't get off because I had to be tough. And so, you know, I'm sure you all can relate to stories like this. We all have horse experiences. And so that's the thing, is even if the horse doesn't stand on the pad, the question is, what do I observe? You know, does he just, is he just not interested today? Is it that it's not that foot, or maybe it's another density, or maybe he's just, you know, just thinking about something else or reacting to something else in his environment. And I have had horses that, I was in the Netherlands, and a woman came for a riding clinic, not a SureFoot clinic. And on my riding clinics, you're supposed to be able to ride the horses you bring. And she came into the arena, and this mare was so distressed that there was the whole indoor arena, and then there was an exit door, which was behind where the audience was, with the wall closed and the opening, and she was going to jump out of that arena. She was so stressed and needed to leave. Using SureFoot with that horse wasn't going to make a difference at all. We took the rider out of the arena and she went into the outdoor, and someone worked with her while I continued to teach. But that horse was so beyond the pale that the SureFoot wasn't going to bring her back. And so that's another, you know, sometimes, you know, it's not the thing to do. And so the more we can look at this from a perspective of what am I going to learn here, then that's the roots of SureFoot. That's the roots of Feldenkrais, asking questions and observing, and then being present with the answers, not trying to instantly put it into a puzzle that we know. I think this is one of the things that's so hard for people. We can look at sentences, and you've probably seen these running around on Facebook, where the letters are all jumbled up. But as long as like the first and the last letter are in the right order, our brain can literally take that jumble and create the correct word. So we can do this translation in our head. We also tend to want to fill in the blanks. I'm so bad at this. Somebody will start a line of discussion, and my brain instantly runs ahead and thinks I have the answer, and Brad always gets mad at me because I come in and go blah, 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 and he's like, will you let me tell you? And I'm like, but, I already know where you're going. Will you let me tell you? So I'm like that horse that's always second guessing and running ahead and not necessarily staying in the present, which is why SureFoot's so good for me. And so being present, and one of the things that I really like to pay attention to is when I pick up a horse's leg, what is the quality of that leg? Is it heavy? Is it light? Is the knee braced? Do they pull it back? Do they push it forward? All of those things, when I pick up that leg, are giving me clues as to how this horse, how grounded he is, and how he's going to move under duress. So Robin Hood said it best. She said, it's not what we do when things are going well, it's what do we do when things are going badly. And so if by picking up the leg, I'm already feeling tension in that leg, then I know in movement, there's going to be tension in that movement. Let me see if I can find, anybody got any questions while I'm like cruising around here and looking for an illustration. Trying to see if I have any horses in movement. The problem is I tend to film them standing still and then not film them in, oh, maybe I have movement here. Let's see. Oh yeah, let's see if I can do this one. So, here's a horse. He was extremely successful in his job. I believe he had been quite an excellent event horse. I think that's what his job was. And he was now becoming a dressage horse. And we started him actually on orange pads on hard, but here he is on firm. Oops, let's see. So this might have been the second time I saw him, or the pictures might not be in order. But here we are, we've got hard in front and slants behind. Okay, and you just notice that stance there. I mean, look at how close together his legs are and how, you know, it's kind of like goat on a rock. And again, I don't try to position their legs when I use the SureFoot pads. I just use the pads underneath the feet, and where the legs wind up is where they wind up. I did stack him, so that was the second time I'd seen him. But you can see here, if we look at how he's standing on this pad, you see how if 12 o'clock is straight ahead, he's standing really strongly towards 3, 2, 1, this corner on this foot. So really medial, which is going to take the line of his leg and put the foot to the outside, lateral to the shoulder point. And you can see that here actually in this picture, that he's actually widened out this foot to have it underneath the shoulder point, but you can see how strongly he's standing to the inside. Now, when we look at the other feet, like his back feet here, he's actually standing fairly square on this one. We see a little bit of a turnout foot and a little load on that inside. So he's laterally loading on the medial side of these 2 feet. I did a bunch of different combinations with him. Again, the reason you see more photos with 4 pads and stacking is because by that point, I can step back a little bit and take pictures, whereas usually I forget to do that in the beginning of the process. But here we can see now, look at how much more underneath him this leg is, right? It's not that wide position. You can still see a bit of turnout on that foot. That was the canter. Let's see, where's the video? Just drop the sound out. And he was a horse that really was not reaching his foot to his nose. And so I worked with him. I've seen him twice, but in this video, I wish I had a before video, which I may have, but I don't have it queued up. You can see how he's stretching his neck down. In other words, he's not using his head. And he was really having to use his head and neck for balance, like what we saw in that first couple of pictures in that stance where he looked like goat on a rock. He really had to use his head and neck for a lot of his balance. But here we can see that he's, there he gets a little tight. There's a little bit of the old idea. And then we see this lovely lengthening top line. And so I'm just gonna take this forward a little bit. When I'm watching a video under saddle, and just recently somebody sent me a video that they're thinking about buying a particular horse. Let me go back here. One of the things I look for is that here we've got a nice lengthening neck, pull the highest point on the arc, nose in front of the vertical, and I want to watch to see, does that foot reach to the nose? So in other words, when I'm assessing stride length, I look to see, is this foot going to reach to the nose, or does the nose come back to the foot? Let me just check my chat here. How people transferred the comfort relaxation. Oh yeah, I can definitely do that. Okay, let me finish this and then I will talk about that question. Okay, so here we can see that his foot is extending outward toward his nose. And then as I come over here and he goes a bit, and it's a bit far away, I don't know that I can make this bigger. Oops. Let's bring it back. Here, you can see a little bit of his head coming up, hollowing out right there. And what'll happen is the stride length will shorten and the foot doesn't really get to the nose. The nose comes back to the foot. But there, when he lengthens his top line, and I don't care what discipline we're talking about and in what frame, I still always want to see that the top line is lengthened and the foot reaches toward the nose instead of the nose coming back. When you can see how open he stays in his throat latch here, right? That he's not drawing his head back as he moves, he's really reaching out. So if I see this throat latch closing and the head coming a little back and the throat latch shortening, or the head and neck coming up, then he's bringing his head back to his foot instead of reaching with his foot to his nose. I hope that's clear. But this was a huge change for this horse. Really nice tail swing, nice, easy, very symmetrical gait when he really started out quite hollow and short for the size of him. Okay, so somebody's asking me, can you share some stories on how people have transferred the comfort, relaxation of SureFoot response to other situations? For example, putting pads in a scary corner in the trail, in a scary corner in a trailer. I recall someone standing in the arena offensively holding a pad. Yeah, so my favorite story is that over in Germany, there's a dressage rider and her horse loves the blue pad, the soft pad, and so when that person's about to go in the show ring, the groom comes ringside and holds the blue pad. And as the horse comes into the arena, he sees the blue pad, takes a big breath, relaxes, and performs. Felicitas von Neumann-Cosel takes the pads with her to the horse shows. And the thing that's so fascinating is that she has been observing differences in the horses when she arrives from the trailering, when she puts them on the pads, than when they're at home. So she can see the effects of trailering, not in the behavior of the horse, but in the tone of the muscles, because the horses are all used to the pads. But she can see that difference in the horses from the trailer ride. I had an Arab down in Florida who was, he's a rather anxious, nervous Arab, and we were in this very big arena where they had cattle, and there was this super scary corner down at one end. And so we started with him. This was, he had not been on pads before. We started with the pads in the non-scary area. So the whole idea there is we want to set the horse up for success. So if we work with the pads in a quiet environment, a familiar environment if possible, without a lot of distraction around that they have to manage. So in a, in an arena that's quiet or a small area, and we get them familiar with the pads, and you can start to see that it elicits that response, the relaxation, the softening the eyes, the breathing. Now the horses start to associate the comfort with the pads, and it does not take them very long in most cases. Then what I'll do is I'll go toward the scary area. Now I don't want to go so far toward it that they have to go into full-blown panic, because you have to think about it. Like if I take you from a really relaxed place and then I take you to the most anxious place I can take you, chances of being successful to flip that nervous system into relaxation are not as good as if I just go a little toward that scary place. And I use the pads again, get the relaxation, get the parasympathetic. I might call it good for the day. Then the next day I'd come and I'd do it once in the quiet place, once in the where I moved it to, make sure everything's good there, and then I'd go a couple more steps closer. So I keep moving this parasympathetic response closer and closer, and I basically conflict the nervous system between comfort and anxiety. And the beauty of the nervous system is it's designed to seek the comfort. It's designed to seek what's called homeostasis, or what Sharon Wilsey calls zero, that inner calmness, that kind of place when you're sitting on the couch at home watching TV, right? Where everything is in a very calm and grounded state of being. So by challenging that in small increments, we do what I call toggling the nervous system. I think of it as taking a light switch and kind of throwing the light switch on, off, on, off, on, off. So when I go toward an anxious place and you see the nervous system rise up into sympathetic, then I use the pads and I trigger the parasympathetic. And then I'll go a little closer and I can see the sympathetic, and then I use the pads and I toggle the parasympathetic. And so in this way, the horse is literally learning how to regulate his own nervous system. And they learn to toggle down, and they learn to be able to relax. Now, whether that's because they're becoming more grounded, or it's an experience and they're starting to make better associations, I can't say all the reasons why this works. I just know that it does. And I think of it as, some people want to call it desensitizing. I actually really don't like that word, because it means you've lost sensation. And I don't want my horses to be desensitized, because then what if I need them to be sensitive to my aids, for one? I want them to be educated. So I think of this as learning, which is what, if we're going to learn something, we have an experience, we give it a rest, classic Feldenkrais idea, rest, right? We come back, we do it again, we get a rest. Feldenkrais would talk about approximations. First approximation, second approximation, third approximation. So my first approximation with Zoom was, it took me all day to get organized. I was terribly concerned that everything was going to work and get my guests organized. And then second approximation was, I'm starting to get a little more relaxed. And now when I have technical difficulties, it's like, okay, I know what to do to solve it. But I learned that. I didn't get desensitized to that. I learned, and I want my horses to be good learners, because the better learners they are, the more they can make associations with disparate things and recognize it's all okay. Can I show the use of SureFoot pads in palliative care for a horse with lameness problems? Well, I mean, I can show you using SureFoot, but I think what you're asking is, how would you use SureFoot for horses that are laid up due to injuries? And let me see if I even have, well, actually I do have a horse. So what I always tell people is, you have 3 other legs that, and Rhonda might recognize this horse too. So this horse had an injury, okay? It was healing, but what I always think about is the other legs. So what's really interesting in this picture is to see, now she could go under saddle at walk. That was not a problem. And they were keeping it bandaged to keep everything clean. But look at where she's put that foot. She's put it way out. And so for me, it was really important to support the other legs, because they're taking more work. Now I love that, because now we're going to offer her a pad under her injured leg, right? And notice that the owner has her hand on her back when she's picking up the foot, but also notice that the mare's not so sure about picking up the leg, right? And you can see her pulling on it, trying to lift it. And the mare, we can clearly see how her weight is here on this left front, but she has still got that injured leg parked to the ground. And so, clearly what's being said there is, I am not willing to have a pad under that foot. So the thing that's so important, downregulating. The thing that's so important is to say, all right, this leg is not the leg she wants a pad underneath. is there another one? And when there's an injury, you know, first of all, you want to get a diagnosis. You do not want to put a horse on an unstable surface if they have ligament, tendon, you know, bone damage until you have vet's approval, because you don't want to make the situation worse. But you have the other 3 legs that need support. So by using SureFoot with the other 3 legs, you're offering comfort and support to the legs that are overworking. In most cases, when I'm dealing with, you know, when somebody emails me and says, you know, my horse has a tendon problem or my horse has arthritis, I direct them to using the hard pads, the orange ones first, because they don't have lateral give. Too much give can be unsettling to a horse when they're already trying to offload one leg. So the more we can offer them comfort and support, but not a lot of instability, you may find pretty quickly they're able to handle a bit more, like the firm, the green, but you wouldn't want to start there, because if it's too much, now you've made them more nervous. You know, it's like they're already going, oh, I'm unstable, and now you're making me more unstable and I can't do it. Okay, I hope that answers your question. If you want further on that. So, you know, with any kind of injury, it's always good to get a diagnosis. There was a horse that I saw this summer, and she went for an MRI, and it turned out she had a torn something very deep in her foot. I can't remember now what it was exactly, but you know, not a thing to be putting her on an unstable surface until that's got some healing, because you're going to keep asking it to move in a way that it's not ready. So, you know, make sure you work with your team, work with your farrier, work with your vet, but do consider the other legs, and especially if the horse is stall bound. You know, by using the SureFoot pads with the other legs, you can keep some movement going in the postural muscles. And it's pointed that it's down-regulating. That's actually right. When they go to parasympathetic, you're down-regulating the system. And so as we teach the horses how to self-regulate and to down-regulate, they become able to be more in control of their emotions and more in control of their environment, because they can start to observe rather than react. And isn't that what we want for our horses? That they can observe a situation and make a determination, as opposed to just freezing or just complying. And the problem with desensitizing, you get compliance, but then you have to teach them everything all over again, because they're not able to make connections. So the good learner is able to make associations. This thing here is similar to something else I've done. I know how to do that thing. I can do this. And it's the same excuse me, concept that we've seen with Marie McAteer when she was talking about the working equitation and teaching horses how to learn the obstacles, learn the different stations, is making sure that you're in that state of calmness. You know, when we look at an athletic performance, they spend so much time learning the skills of their sport. And that's done using a variety of techniques, but it's done slowly. And then as they become more proficient, they can add the speed. But if we go to the speed too soon without actually learning the technique, that's when we're going to get injuries. And I think the place you can see that the most is in reining. Because in reining, they're too busy teaching them the maneuvers and not busy teaching them the balance. And I've seen this several years ago. I was down in Texas at the sales, and I was watching these young horses, and they hadn't learned the balance, so they were actually potentially injuring themselves in the way they were using their body, because they didn't have the technique. And if we did that with any downhill skier, they would blow their knees out. They wouldn't survive it. They wouldn't become an athlete. And so it's so important that we really think about these horses in terms of, excuse me, teaching them the skills, breaking it down, bringing in the relaxation, making sure they have an understanding, connecting the dots for them, using SureFoot in all those little places to bring the system back down again, so that we wire it in a positive way that they can make the associations so that when we do pick up the speed, we're not going to cause the injuries. And I think that's one of the most important things we can do with our horses, is really help them understand their jobs so that we save them from potential injury later on. Yeah, a thinking horse is not reactive, and a thinking person is not reactive, and I can be both sometimes. So I get the reactive side of it. You know, I had a little horse named Andy, and I was trying to figure out this reining thing at the time, and he wasn't finished, so I was mucking around with him a lot. But I took the time from the ground, actually, and I taught him how to do a spin and stay over his inside hind leg, which we can debate that all you want, but the bottom line is, if it's done well, it doesn't matter which hind leg. Done badly, it's damaging either way. And so I taught him how to do that. And I could literally go to the field, having not touched him for 6 months, pull him out of the field, put his tack on, put his student on, take my split reins, go behind him and spin him on his inside hind leg. Now, slow enough that I could stay with him because the rider didn't know what they were doing, but he would literally drill a hole into the arena, which is what they are supposed to do. Pivoted on his inside leg. But that's because he understood the maneuver. And he could also do a rollback, which is related to the outside hind leg. And he could do a 180 rollback with no momentum, just 180, not touch. And we never see a proper rollback anymore in the reining patterns. We see a sliding stop, a turnaround, and a lead departure instead of a rollback, which is a 180 maneuver. Their feet should not touch the ground again on the front feet until they're going in the opposite direction, 180 degrees. But that's because the horses don't understand the balance. It's not because they can't physically do it. And that comes down to our training. And so when we think about teaching them the proper skills to our athletic animals, just the way we want to teach the proper skills to our athletic children so that they can perform to their potential, then we have a true athlete that understands the game and is going to minimize the injuries because he really knows what he's doing. So I'm going to leave you there with those thoughts about your training and your horses and how you can use SureFoot. If anybody has any last questions, just pop them in the chat or the Q&A. I'll bring Amy back next week. I'm sorry it didn't work out this week. She has some great stories and I'm really looking forward to hearing them. And so stay tuned. I will put that up into the Murdoch Method shop under the webinars with Wendy, and you can go sign up there. And I'll see you tomorrow, Saturday, with Jillian Kreinbring for her second time rescheduling. And have a great day. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. So take care and bye-bye.